Hello and welcome to another video. I'm going to be re-recording this previous video that I uploaded, which is about items and champions. And I'm going to be trying to just get the summary of what I was trying to say there, because apparently my sound was too low on that. So basically what I was trying to say there is that with items and champions, we have an interesting perspective which can help you understand how you can look at these types of changes when they make like big changes and who can really benefit from them, right? So both in the Swarm game mode and in League of Legends, the actual game, we have a concept which is something I would call an item carrier, right? So this is when I would say that a champion is not really playing for themselves, but rather they're playing for the item that they do have, right? So for example, let's say that your champion amplifies healing, right? In that case, something like the Hydra, which heals, right? So basically the lifesteal Hydra, I don't remember the exact name, Ravenous, right? Ravenous Hydra. That one would make a lot of sense, right? Because you walk up to a minion wave and suddenly you're full HP. Makes sense. Similarly, you have Yasuo and Yon. Doubles crit chance. Infinity Edge gives you a lot of AD and a lot of crit chance, or rather crit damage, but also crit chance, right? In that case, it also gives you 50% instead of 25%. Okay, makes sense. We buy this and then we do a lot of damage, right? So in these cases, the champion itself is not playing out their own kit, and you're not buying the items to amplify what the champion does, but rather you're buying the items because the champion can provide something to these items which will make them shine. Oppositely, we have in the Yon and Yasuo example, Berserker Greaves and stuff like that. Those attack speed items are amplifying how you play the champion out, right? In that case, your Q is going on a lower cooldown, and you are suddenly able to do more with the champion, right? So then you're playing the champion itself. Then, lastly, we have kind of like a combination of the two, which is something like Lethal Tempo, right? You're both taking Lethal Tempo on Yasuo and Yon because you want them to actually abuse the rune. So you're playing for the rune, but at the same time, it's also amplifying what your kit does. So it's doing both at the same time. And that's why it's such a good synergy on them. In a lot of cases, then, we have these examples of items doing one or the other. And when items are stronger, then it's going to make more sense to play both the champion carriers, which are carrying the items, and also to look for more ways to utilize the items themselves. Say Bork is really strong, right? And let's say that Urgot or something procs the on hit really easily, right? Even though the Urgot on hit thing has some modifier that makes it not as OP, right? But okay, let's just say that it procced at 100% rate, right? Like the way it did in Arena with some of the augments for Urgot. Okay, then suddenly you're thinking, oh, well, let's buy Blade of the Ruined King on Urgot. Let's proc it a lot. Even though the item doesn't make much sense on Urgot, because what he wants is some tanky stats. He wants some bruiser type items. Like if you look at the build he's running right now, he runs Hullbreaker and he runs Black Cleaver and items like that. But then he would be buying this because he can abuse it in some way, right? Then I wanted to showcase 3 examples of champions who have different kits, which allow for different things, right? So Ezreal's kit, for example, is good in itself. So here we have the Ezreal kit spells, right? And their ratios. So Ezreal has just a lot of stuff in his kit. So he has AD ratio, AP ratio, he has attack speed on his passive, right? So he has like a bit of everything. He has like spells that are long range, a lot of skill shots, mobility, whatever. So he's not really lacking much of anything, right? So what you want on Ezreal is to amplify what he's already doing because his kit is really loaded up, right? Same thing with Kai'Sa. These champions have a lot of stuff in their kit, so they don't need to play for an item because they don't have a really simple kit. A really simple kit is going to be more likely to want to play for an item or for some stats. Also, this is crazy what it's giving me for ads. That's actually crazy. Anyway, in this case, we think, okay, well, what does Ezreal want? So he wants to poke a bit. So Trinity or Sheen procs make sense, right? Proc Sheen, pokes, really long range, can try it often, amazing. Similarly, he needs a lot of mana. So we have like mana cost here, we have mana cost here, mana cost here, mana cost here, right? It adds up, and we don't have a lot of base mana, so Mana Mule also makes sense, or Essence Reaver, right? Then what else could we use? We think about it. Pen. Okay, so we want a pen item. We want CDR because if we can get these CDs lower, we also have a CD refresh here. That means we will just get more rotations of our spells out. Makes sense, right? So if you look at the items in this way, then both the build that he's playing in itself and the strength of said build are both very dependent on Ezreal's kit and his numbers, right? Rather than the items. So the items just amplify what he's doing, and we're just trying to work around that. There aren't that many items that are fitting the exact niche that he's looking for, so he is quite dependent on the items still. So if Trinity is quite bad, or Mana Mune is quite bad or something, then he can also struggle. But at the same time, it's not as bad as in other cases, right? And if he had more items he could utilize in a, let's say, in a good way, then he wouldn't really care that much. Like, for example, last season he had 2 builds, which was Essence Reaver and Trinity build, right? And in that case, even though the Trinity build was not so good, the Essence Reaver build was still good, so he didn't really care that much. Then we have a second champ, right? Jinx is going to be the opposite of that. Her kit is really simple. She has a lot of attack speed here. So total attack speed, that means if we buy a lot of attack speed, she's going to get even more attack speed, right? Okay, a really good, simple thing to get, right? But it's not a base thing, right? Not a base stat. This is a base, right? So he's getting base bonus attack speed. So buying more attack speed on him will not multiply here. Meanwhile, here, it multiplies into itself. So this makes it so playing for attack speed on her can be really good. Again, then we get more attack speed here. Boom. So that means she's getting a lot of attack speed. So we want some kind of damage, right? So now there are 2 routes that people go on Jinx. Either they go the crit route, where they're playing for this, right? Modified 110% AD ratio AoE auto attacks, right? That also can crit. Or they're playing for this, where they get a lot of AD and a lot of pen, and already high base damage on top of high AD ratios and percent missing health ratio are going to make it so you do a lot of damage with these explosive abilities, right? So you're just playing to let the items do their thing, right? You have something on your kit that allows the items to shine, and you just abuse that. So you get items with high AD, items with high penetration, and suddenly, boom, you do a lot of damage. Or conversely, you can also get a lot of crit, a lot of AD, and then you have attack speed anyway, and you can just auto-attack a lot. Either way. Then Cortes is an interesting example where you can do both. So if you go something like a Leandri's build, and especially when Leandri had mana, he was very much an item carrier. So you would play for his E, you would play for his ult, you would try to apply Leandri's. On top of that, you would also get a lot of damage on his Q or whatever, right? And it's also low cooldown, and everything together just makes it so he can permanently apply a lot of burns. Amazing. But then you also have some builds where, for example, if you go Malignants, and then you go some kind of AP items, or burn items anyway, you're not as much of an item carrier anymore, and you're more of a standalone champion. In this way, we can look at builds and champions in terms of what they're looking for, right? So with Cortes, for example, we have an ult that hits everyone. So this is a pretty good thing to play for, right? At the same time, we have a Q that does a shit ton of damage if we can hit it. This is a pretty good thing to play for, right? But these things can be pretty hard to hit. We have an MR Shred here, and we have permanently applying AoE. This is a really easy thing to play for, right? So if we want an easy to play champion out of this, then we should play item carrier Cortes. So we should have Leandris and stuff like that. And if we want harder to play, but more rewarding in terms of like burst kind of, then we should probably play some kind of Cortes that amplifies these things, right? That amplifies the champion's kit. And if you remember the Swarm game mode, and if you played that, Jinx as a champion that gave a lot of ability haste, right? So what you would do on Jinx is you would get a lot of random items that were just good on their own, like standalone items. And then you would just have Jinx permanently cycle this ability haste, right? And since you have a lot of ability haste, the items would keep proccing and proccing and proccing. And since you have a lot of movement speed as well, you would get a lot of AD from that. And so you have a lot of AD and ability haste, these items would just carry. Now, opposite of that was something like Riven, where you had a dash, and you didn't even need to get a lot of items because you just wanted a lot of movement speed. So the dash would perma proc. So in that case, you were playing for the champion's kit itself. So what's the point really here, right? The new item changes are a lot of, well, let's just say most of the item changes are going to be nerfs, right? And so a lot of the item changes are nerfs. That means that a lot of the item carrier type stuff is going to be very nerfed, right? Because the base stats of the champion are going to take over a lot more. The base kit of the champion is going to matter a lot more, right? So then the champions that like to use their own abilities, like to use their own kit and so on, and don't rely on items so much, those are going to be a lot better, right? And I don't really want to draw this out. Mostly I just want to give you a different perspective on how you can look at items and champions, and something that can maybe help you understand when changes hit, like who it can be good for, who it can be bad for, and so on. Anyway, that's all for now. I just wanted to remake the previous video because apparently the sound was too low. That's all. Bye bye. Thank you for watching.